We have these kinds of groups all across the church, and many of them are great, but admittedly, these groups have not necessarily been designed to carry out all these functions of a church. And oftentimes groups are same gender or even same ethnicity, but we want to cultivate as much as possible groups that represent intergenerational, multi-ethnic community, what we value as a church.
Why?
Yeah, because Democrats told them to do that.
I mean, why? Like that? I mean, and that's the crux of even the area of kind of Tim Keller, where he in New York, of course, very easy. Yeah, sure. If your church should reflect the culture in which you live in, it's a diverse culture up there, by all means. And I don't know where. I mean, in close to DC, I don't know what the exact demographic is there, but there is just this level of why? Why do we need to infiltrate these groups? Because that's a super white group. Do we sitting here, do we need to bring on a black guy so that we can have, should we be speaking to this? Because this is only a white perspective.
Right. Yep. And which gets into, we were just talking about Voddie Baucham's book, which gets into standpoint epistemology and the assumption that true knowledge comes from particular experience. Right. Which is bogus and not biblical. But no, you're absolutely right. Daniel and I talked about that on the first go round, which was that's exactly the question we need to ask: is why? Is it inherent? The question we asked is it inherently sinful to have a mostly white church? No, it's not. It is. It can be sinful if your white church is full of people who hate black people. Yeah. That's sinful.
Hello and welcome to the Reformation Red Pill podcast, brought to you by the Forge Press and now a part of the Fight, Laugh, Feast network. I am your host, Joshua Haymes, and today, as you might have guessed by now, we have a very special episode for you guys. Today, me and a dear brother in Christ will be reacting to and discussing the Real David Platt Documentary, along with, frankly, a lot of other problems that we see as endemic in the broader evangelical world. So we discuss those problems and we talk through how we see those concerns addressed within our denomination, CREC. So heads up, we banter for 20 minutes before we actually start reacting to the documentary, so feel free to skip ahead, but if you do, you're gonna be missing out on some golden nugget. But that's your prerogative. This is actually episode 5 of our Knox Tier exclusive podcast, Dark Roasted. As many of you may know by now, we were deplatformed on Patreon. That's right. They canceled our little theology podcast. For what? Well, essentially being too Christian. But as I have said before, I am not concerned. God is faithful, and he will continue to provide for us. We are in the process right now of building a Christian, anti-fragile, uncancelable alternative to Patreon, which will be up and running very soon. My hope is that we will have it up and running and all our exclusive content up on our Patreon alternative about the beginning of February. And so if you have been blessed by our work here at the Reformation Red Pill podcast and you want to support us, you can join our new club membership. And specifically, I want to encourage you guys to join our Knox tier. It is our best deal. You get some wonderful exclusive content, including this podcast, Dark Roasted, which we will be putting out a lot more of in the coming days. You get our Minivisicard Tumbler. You get access to our Discord and a whole lot more. Plus, you get a little mystery gift that comes with the Tumbler. So if that doesn't entice you, I don't know what will. So help us keep making content, help us keep this podcast running, join our Knox tier membership, or really any tier is so helpful to us. And we are so grateful for all who have joined our club membership. And now, with all of that corporate gobbledygook out of the way, let's get to that Real David Platt documentary reaction.
Hello and welcome back to Dark Roasted, the backstage podcast of the Reformation Red Pill podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Haymes, and you'll notice that the Ginger Viking, Daniel Margheim, is not sitting next to me. Instead, we've replaced him with the greatest mustache you've ever seen, Zachary Hoeks. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people?
All right. Well, it is the greatest mustache you've ever seen, but I am Zach Hoeks. I am the husband to Tay. We've been married for it'll be 10 years in May, which is kind of nuts that we're about to hit a decade.
Man, that is nuts. Wow.
She was telling me the other night actually that when we were early being married, we knew a couple who had hit their 10-year, and then it was like, that just feels such a long time.
It is a long time.
Decade. And now it's like, it is a long time, but I don't know. I'm a father of 5.
How old
it
are
feels
you?
like I'm 30.
He's 30, folks.
So
Father
a third
of
my life.
5.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, way to get started early, man.
Yeah, man.
Way to get started early.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I was like Zack is younger than me, but he's older than me. That was my first thought. Zack is one of my favorite. He's here because he's straight up one of my favorite people at Pilgrim Hill. It was whenever we came to visit and I met Zack, I just knew I belonged here because Zack was here. He greets me on Sundays with a holy kiss, trying to obey that passage, and I love it. I'll stick out for it a little bit now.
It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. I heard Brooks say too many times his story about going to Theopolis conference and Peter Lightheart greeting everybody with a holy kiss.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, I think I've heard that story 3 times now. It's time that we just started doing
Implementing it.
We just started doing it.
I see what you're trying to get us to do,
Right,
Pastor Brooks. Here we go.
Like, he just needed somebody to take the charge and to be like, you know what?
That's right.
It needs to happen. It'll be me. That's fine.
Having Peter Lightheart greet you with a holy kiss I haven't heard him tell that story, but that's really funny because Peter Lightheart, I love reading Peter Lightheart, and I met him. He's super, he's a great guy. But he's not the kind of person I would have suspected.
I wouldn't have
give
thought,
you a holy kiss.
And I'm probably not the right guy for this message, but it looks like a lot of facial hair to take to the cheek.
Yeah.
Because mine probably gets somebody in the eye.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple eye shots there, but
It
for
happens.
the most part,
It happens. So
it's
every
not
once
like
in a while,
furry thing
right? It's not
coming at you.
engulfing.
Yeah, it's not engulfing.
It just is. It's just
Sure.
there. Yeah. But.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Daniel Margheim is out of town, and I've been asking Zack to come on with Daniel and I for weeks now, just saying, let's make it happen, and we just haven't. But here we are. We're doing it, and just so happens that Daniel's out of town. So we're going to be doing it together. We're going to continue today with the David Platt documentary, and I'll ask you guys after we do this episode if you want us to continue this, because we said a lot on the first episode. You didn't watch the first episode of that Daniel and I
haven't
did
seen it yet.
It's like 2 hours long. So
That's one of the reasons why I haven't seen it yet.
it was super long.
5 kids.
Yeah, that's right. For some reason though, the best performing episodes we have are always like 2 hours. And I don't know if that's telling me just keep talking, or I don't know what it is.
I think there's a fine line. I was actually talking about this with Charlton yesterday, where you either need a really long form where you sit down and just take in a ton of information, or it needs to be short enough for a commute.
Yep.
Where that is the sweet spot, where you have like the briefing,
Uh-huh.
where that's just 30 minutes. You just go when
Knock
you're
it out.
driving, But then the long form stuff is where I know for me, like a lot of the times kids are down for a nap, finishing up the work day, put it on.
You put it on in the background, or what do you do when
I
you
put
watch
it on in the
long-
background.
Yeah.
I mean, so aside from having 5 kids, I'm building our house. And so it is like when work ends,
Yeah.
the work begins.
Yeah.
And so it's background.
Yeah, totally.
It's background.
Totally. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so anyway, we've been at Zack, obviously member of Pilgrim Hill, and it was a little bit of your background similar to mine, in that you recently, whenever I showed up at Pilgrim Hill, how long had you been there already?
So we've been at Pilgrim Hill for about 2 years. And we actually went so I grew up in John MacArthur Church in Southern California. So had been reformed in soteriology.
You've been
but
that
obviously
light rose
not.
Calvinist for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we had kind of gone through a few churches, COVID, ended up at a Reformed Baptist church over in Hendersonville.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, had really started taking the red pill, started going down I'm hearing a lot of Jeff Durbin and James White say things where I'm like, yeah,
It's making sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then come to find out there's a category for that. It's actually being reformed.
Yep.
And so kind of kept digging. And then obviously as for a lot of people, James and Jeff being the gateway drug for the truly dark rose stuff.
Yeah, the truly dark rose stuff.
Yeah. Because I remember listening to my first Peter Lightheart audiobook.
What
and
was
being
it?
like, I think it was the one on baptism. I'm blanking on the name now.
I know what you're talking about. my first one was Against Christianity. Have you read that one?
I haven't.
It's really good. Man, Lightheart is. Be careful with Lightheart.
He's good. He's good. Yeah. Well, because it was on baptism.
Yeah.
Even being Paedobaptist is relatively new, but I'm listening to it and I'm like,
because that was since I've been here. Is whenever you became, because you were, I remember you were Baptist
becoming
whenever I came to
Paedo.
visit.
Yes.
Because you were one of the few holdouts.
Yeah.
And Daniel Margine was like, at least there's another one.
Yeah.
And then you
got him here in the interim. It was literally between the time where you guys were like visited right. and then left and then came back. And I was like, I'm Paedo now.
Oh man, we'll get Daniel eventually. We'll get him. This is not fair because he's not here to defend himself. But on one of the episodes we did on it, so Daniel and I backstage. So we're reacting to the debate, the James White, Jared Longshore debate that I hosted.
Oh, okay.
So we're just going back through the arguments and talking through them, and the one that I hadn't heard before that I think kind of blows a lot of James White's argumentation up is Jared Longshore pointed out that the passage in Jeremiah where he says, from the least to the greatest, you shall all know me, which is like that key passage that says everyone in the new covenant will be regenerate, and he points out that phrase from the least to the greatest, and in the other two places Jeremiah uses that phrase, it is not talking about every single person. It's a majority of people, but not comprehensively everyone. And Daniel's been telling me for a long time that that's one of his key passages that keeps him Credo Baptist. And so whenever we brought that up, Jared hit him with that. Then I came at him with that, and I'm still waiting for a good reply because he took a bunch of notes and he's going to come back with it. But man, I want to get him so bad. I know probably half of you guys are Baptists out there too. So they're like on the edge of their seats. Like, is Daniel going to convert? Because I'm not going to convert. I could if I was really convinced, but everything is pointing in one direction for me. Like everything makes more sense.
I feel like so my like Reformed, first it was postmillennialism. And that was like, yes, I get that 100%.
Yeah. That was the funnest theological transition I've ever gone through.
Oh yeah. Well, and it was funny because so I became post-mill, and then like as that kind of opens up a lot of different covenantal understandings and stuff like that, because the Bible then, again, I think both with covenant theology and postmillennialism and then paedobaptism, everything just feels more coherent in the Bible with those under those three things.
Yep.
And so I remember we went and visited my parents in, again, John MacArthur's church. And so definitely not Paedobaptist. But like there, like I'm obviously jazzed up because I think that, I mean, the cage stage is not just for Calvinism. You hit a cage stage for postmillennialism, for everything.
Yeah.
And so I go out there and I remember my parents saying to me, they're like, I feel like all you do is talk about postmillennialism and patriarchy. And I was like, I mean, I'm sorry, but like that's kind of all there is right now.
Putting your finger. Well, I mean, part of that is too like putting your finger on the source, the place that where culture, the doctrines that our culture needs the most.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that those two, postmillennialism and patriarchy, really are like they're the two doctrines that have probably transformed. In practical terms, transformed your life the most.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, of course I'm going to talk about it.
And with obvious fruit. Like I think too that, like it's not that it's this simple thing that is just kind of a peripheral theological understanding type of thing. It's something that does have great impact. I mean, again, 5 kids, like there are tangible fruits that are the result of those shifts. Because even before, we had 2 kids, we were feeling pretty good about that. We were like, can't even, and then it became, we have 3. And then it was like very quickly. So we have almost 2 sets of Irish twins. And so that's where
you guys are wild.
My wife has been pregnant. So we lost 2 before our youngest right now. And so she had been pregnant 7 times in 7 years.
Good gravy.
And so we're in a season of reprieve for my wife right now.
I should say so.
Yeah.
I should say so.
Yeah. But thankfully she is a trooper.
She is.
But
she's always got a smile on her face.
yeah, she's the best.
Or even if she's exasperated, she's doing it in an endearing way.
Yeah. I like her a lot.
She seems great.
She's good stuff. But yeah, so I feel like those three, like, because there's just that easy and obvious, this is actually impacting every day. Like waking up and even just, and another rabbit trail, I guess, but even waking up and just not having the rapture mindset of my greatest thought is that today could just be over. It could be point.
Today, yeah.
Like the
clothes laying on the ground.
Right. The best thing that could happen to me today is history ends.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. So it's been, But.
That's fun. No, that's fun. And that makes total sense. I think a lot of people, a lot of guys who are going to be watching this can relate to that. Because, I mean, what I've realized too in starting this podcast on these topics in this particular way has really attracted a bunch of people who are just coming into this world, this, dark roast reformed world. And they're not, a lot of them currently aren't, maybe there isn't a CREC church or a church that holds to these convictions near them. So it's like they're really looking for other people. So it's been really cool to have people in our community, in our Discord and things like that. Oh, are you a finger tamper?
To be honest, I have always used my tamper for this. I was over at the Boomer Shines one night for a Sabbath dinner. And Karsten, who I'm like a decade older than at this point, I saw him do it and I was like, like I feel the same about being like not being a man who licks his fingers to put out a candle.
Yeah.
So like even last night we're having our Sabbath dinner with the candles, and I was looking at the candle. I was like, I've never done this, and it makes me feel like such a woman.
That's good.
And thankfully, all of the kids were like, "Can I blow one out?" And so I didn't even get the chance. I didn't get the chance.
Am I gonna man up right now? I didn't have the chance.
But I was like, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with just being like not being a man who's afraid of a little discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's just those dumb tangible, like even working outside and stuff like that. I'll intentionally not work with gloves.
Yeah.
Like I don't want my kids to remember my hands as being super soft. I want them to remember dad's hands.
Yeah.
Not in that country song way where it's like daddy's hands were strong when he hit me or whatever that song is. But I mean, not in that sense. Like that. Not like that.
Oh man.
But
well, that's interesting that you bring that up because that's one of the things I've noticed about coming into this world. And I remember hearing Dougie Dubs say this whenever he was given some talk on masculinity and femininity, biblical gender roles. He was talking about it's masculinity isn't about like the cutting firewood and whiskey and smoking and I don't know, named off a bunch of like masculine type of activities. He was like, that's not primarily what masculinity is about. That's not what we're trying to get you to become. But if you do become what we're trying to get you to become in like pursuing biblical masculinity, that stuff will follow.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that was like the most refreshing message that I'd heard on this topic, that it was like, that stuff isn't irrelevant.
Yeah.
That those qualities in masculine activities, doing little things. And I started doing little things like that too, like little things to challenge, like, am I afraid of a little discomfort? I remember I was reading, I was reading, have you ever heard of the book Red Rising?
I have actually. I don't know why. It's
a sci-fi. You probably heard it from me because I've been telling everyone to read it. It's the most fun I've had in a sci-fi series in, I don't know, it might be my favorite sci-fi series. It is so fun. But anyway,
I didn't see it on the bookshelf, so
it's upstairs it's in the bookshelf that the guests see. This is those are my actually I've got a lot of pretty books.
You do.
Yeah. But anyway, my prettiest books are upstairs. Anyway, so it's upstairs. But we're getting really far afield. but in the story, there's like society's broken down into different colors, and they live on Mars in the first book. But different colors. You got reds, they're like the slaves, and then blues are like the science people, whatever. And the golds are the ones who rule, and they're basically fascists. Like they rule with an iron fist, sort of. They're also like tend towards well, no, yeah, they're basically fascist. But you've got the soft golds. They don't have a scar. They didn't make it through the training to become rulers, and they just live for pleasure and stuff like that. But then you've got they're called the peerless scarred, and they're the ones who went through this like horror, like terrible training that they had to. I don't want to ruin anything, but this crazy training that toughened them up a ton. And like when they sit down, one of the things in the book is when they sit down for dinner, they wait. I don't remember how long, like a few minutes to even touch the food, like to discipline their body. It doesn't matter how hungry they are. They're like, no, this won't rule over me. I rule over this food. So they wait to eat. I don't do that, but I'm saying I thought about that. I was like, that's kind of awesome.
I like that though. And there are some things like that where I'll try to be, like even in eating something.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, I'm just going to predetermine a number of these that I'm going to eat.
Cookies.
Just because again, like I think that you do, I see it in my kids all the time,
yes.
where you have to have those small, even Luke 16:10, where, one who's faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. So let's give myself a little.
Yeah.
Let's give self-control
right
in these very tiny little places that seem like, oh, this is so easy. But like, yeah, good. It should be.
It's interesting. I think if you're the type of person, that's absolutely right. If you're the type of person who, when a big plate of cookies is in front of you and you eat till your stomach hurts, you're the type of person who is very vulnerable to things like pornography, towards like other vices, because you're controlled by the sense of pleasure. Like that's hedonistic, right? I'm just gonna gorge myself. You're like Eustace. It's what you're like, instead of being the kind of man. And I struggle with that whenever especially when they're like bite-sized, like fresh cookies.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just take them down instead of say, no, I'm having 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to have 3.
Well, and one of the good things about Pilgrim Hill right now is there is actually a fight for who has the best chocolate chip cookies.
Who do you think's winning?
To be honest, I've had Holly Carter's most recently.
Have you had Wesley's?
So Wes is the other one. Those are the 2 cookie champions.
Wesley
at church.
Those are those.
They're great
on them,
and but they both do that.
They both do the salt.
And so that's the thing, is it's like they both have like this secret.
Yeah, the secret.
That's obviously right in front of your face. You look at the cookies and you're like, oh, it's the salt.
Yeah, that's right.
But both phenomenal. I'd have to have them side by side to truly be able to decide. And they probably are both like the same online recipe. Where like they're both like, I'm going to pick the 6th recipe down that people don't pick. And that's what it was. But,
That's good. Well, all right. Now that we're 20 minutes in, let's get to our, like I said, we usually do whiskey, but we're here, if you can't tell by my deep radio voice, it's 7:30 a.m. So I've still got the sleepies in my throat. So we're not going to do whiskey. We've got some coffee but we are going to do our pipes. What are you smoking?
I don't even remember. So they actually
just pipe weed in the South Farley.
Yeah. So it is it's a black raspberry tobacco. And really what happened with it was I was at the local lumber store in Springfield. Opened up a humidor. Which the guy was just like, it's my personal stash, opening it up for everybody. And so I was grabbing some cigars for the book study that Clint does. And they had some pipe tobacco, and so I was like, sure, I'll take that. And it was so cheap that I got twice as much as I should have, instead of just saying, well, I want to have some of that and some of this other one. And it's like, but I got, so it's fine. Shelby said it smells like every pipe tobacco from like 30 years ago drugstores. Because I guess his grandpa smoked something that smells similar.
Yeah.
I didn't have a pipe smoking grandpa to compare it to.
Same.
But I like Shelby quite a bit. Mine too. But I don't have a pipe smoking grandpa, but Shelby is solid enough that I'm happy to be smoking the same pipe tobacco as his grandpa. I feel good about that.
Is it aromatic or is it a Virginia? Do you know?
It's aromatic. I'm not.
This is aromatic. I'm not Shelby. I'm not going to dump on you for smoking a good aromatic.
I appreciate it.
My wife likes the aromatic. Well, she doesn't really like any of it. But if I come in smelling like the aromatics, she's okay with that.
Yeah.
But if I came in smelling like a daggum dirty cigar, those
well, and those are the flavors I like more.
Yeah.
Obviously, this one is far more palatable. For my wife, even coming, especially again with the mustache, it lingers. It's there all day long.
It lingers. I know about that.
All day long.
I know about
that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm smoking my Nording. I got kind of into pipe smoking, if you can't tell by my collection. And so for like 3 Christmases, anytime my grandparents or anyone asked like, what kind of pipe do you want? I was like, or what do you want? It was always a pipe. So I got a couple of Dunhills, Costellos, but this Nording, it wasn't that expensive, but it is just a delightful smoker, man. And I bought it and it was like closer to that color, and you make it change color. You darken it with your oils.
It's a mood pipe.
It's a mood pipe.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I got this for Christmas last year. It's a Lord of the Rings pipe.
Love it.
It has a hobbit hole door on it.
Oh, yes. I think Lord of the Rings is the reason that like 30% of people start smoking pipes.
Every man wants the huge, long
That was
Gandalf
my
thing.
first pipe
And
was
like,
a church warden.
Yeah, it's always stopped me to be like, there's no practical, like, what in the world am I going to do with that?
There is. It actually, have you ever smoked a church warden? So the smoke is much cooler by the time it gets to your mouth. So you avoid tongue bite with church wardens because it's way cooler. So it in some ways it kind of is a little bit more pleasurable of a smoke. I haven't seen my wife would smoke the church warden that I used to have. I can't.
Oh, so it's a pipe for women.
That's right. That's why I upgraded.
Okay.
I'm on the Nording.
Okay.
All right. All right. We're going to watch this documentary, and Pastor Brooks is going to be here soon for us to do another episode all together. That'll be fun. But let's jump in to the documentary. So you've watched up to where we are right now. I haven't watched any more than you guys have seen from the episode I did with Daniel. So it'll be nice to just change it up to where you're commenting, since it was me and Daniel commenting for the first like half an hour of this one, just to get your thoughts on it. Were you influenced by David Platt early on?
So I listened to a lot of David Platt sermons, listened to his Secret Church.
Makes sense if you were in that light roast, John MacArthur. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause the Together for the Gospel stuff, he was all over, and really, likened him to Piper, mostly because the passion is there in the preaching style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I started Radical. I didn't finish Radical.
Good call.
It kind of, I don't know, it quickly became evident to me that it was just this really heavy-handed emotional argument to just leave everything. And
so you picked up on that.
I don't even know when this was, but for whatever reason, yeah. And maybe this was just kind of where I was at with some, trying to get away from some morbid introspection on, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Which there's some good Pharisaism in some of this and all that jazz. But I think that, he went woke so fast,
dude,
that
so fast.
It was a pretty obvious, like, I just don't know if it's really I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah. I hadn't heard from David Platt in years, but I just thought fondly back on the times that I had sat 8 hours under his teaching for Secret Church more than once, and that kind of thing. And then 2020 hits, and all of a sudden I hear him blabbing on about white privilege and all this kind of stuff.
Well, even that clip early in this, where he's just like, me as a white pastor, and
Yeah. So, well, anyway, let's jump in. We'll just keep going and see what we have to see and say.
So that's Dave Young risking his life to see this mission accomplished at NBC.
We looked at each other as small group leaders and went, we feel really insignificant. Are we being told that our ministries...
By the way, anytime you want to say something, just...
Well, even there, it's just here's this cool new guy just taking a quick selfie of it, is so funny. Just to kind of try to bring it down to this, like, I'm going to do this, which is kind of twofold, obviously. Like the lack of any type of thoughtfulness and like, let's actually make a video introducing this guy who's apparently going to come and make these major changes to the church. I'm just going to...
And he's just walking.
Just as I'm walking, hey,
just
it's me, guys.
Oh, yeah, I got to make that video.
Right, right. And so, even that's just... Yeah.
And the guy's line in saying, oh, definitely the best year, like the subtle implication that the years of ministry, the best years of ministry are definitely ahead, not behind. Those sucked.
He's been reading his LinkedIn feed for too long.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, man.
Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Well, if you're anything like me, you want to be a good, godly man, a man who provides for his family, a man who wisely stewards the financial resources that God has given him. And man, is that hard to do in today's economy. Now, I have personally spoken with multiple financial advisors, and I want you guys to know that I am personally using Joe Garrissey and his team at Backwards Planning Financial. Maybe you thought like I have. I wish that I had started investing years ago for my family's financial future. Maybe then me and my family would be in a better financial position. Listen, it's never too late to start. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial works hard to help families achieve their financial goals. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just now getting started investing, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your financial goals. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com or call Joe Garrissey at 615-767-2555.
In 1 Timothy 4:8, the Apostle Paul tells us that physical training is indeed valuable for the Christian life. And while physical fitness is not the most important thing in the Christian life, it is still of great importance, particularly for men. Why? Because God has called you to protect and to provide. Men, you are called to be protectors. Therefore, God is calling you to be strong, spiritually, emotionally, and yes, even physically. Physical fitness is also important because God has called you to provide. Your family needs you to live a long, healthy life. So, get strong and stay fit with Mount Athos. They are a Christian fitness company that uses some of the best natural ingredients. So I've personally been using their supplements for 6 months now, and I'll tell you right now, I am not going back. They are my new supplement brand. So, stop giving your money to pagan fitness brands that can't even tell the difference between men and women. Join Mount Athos in creating the next generation of health, strength, and spiritual vitality. Visit athosperform.com/Reformation. And don't forget to use code Reformation for an exclusive discount today.
Are problematic, that they are not healthy, that they are shallow.
Like, we need to change the way we're thinking about church.
And David tried in elders meetings to have us give up our elder control and authority of how the money was spent. David wanted to say, this is how we're going to spend the money, and you're just going to have to kind of go along with it. And he couldn't with us basically in charge. You know, as a church constitution, it was a congregationally run church that the congregation has put the elders in charge. And David wasn't used to that. David came from Birmingham, where he was in charge. He came from the IMB. He was in charge. He was in charge of Radical. And so this kind of stymied his management style a little bit. And so that's why we got the blue document. He didn't really want a lot of accountability.
They switched to a new model where it would be like a discipleship group, except bigger. Your goal was to have maybe up to 100 people, but it would embody all 12 traits of a church. And that meant that they could do baptisms, that they could do their own services, that they could do communion, all the things.
So we want to help current groups grow in these.
That right there
Yeah.
is such a huge red flag.
Yep.
And I do get that, like, that church model is very much so, we're going to get to a certain size, we're going to plant, and it's going to be all these different things. And I mean, even all churches that size, you have to delegate certain pastoral responsibilities
Totally.
to elders because that is, but to think about the fact that you could have people getting baptized and given communion with just completely apart of from the knowledge of the pastor of the church
Yeah.
is crazy.
That's wild.
I mean, and again, who knows how these leaders of these groups are getting, and so then they may get into it. But that's the wild, wild west.
That's yet another reason why I'm a Presbyterian now. The polity issue, it goes under the radar for a lot of people, but I think that the congregational model just inherently has within it some huge flaws. Not least of which is the tendency. Now, the Reformed Baptist is going to push back and say, well, Reformed Baptists don't fall into this trap as much, but I don't know. But the pastor CEO model of church is seems to be a little bit tied inherently to that congregational model. You can't have the pastor CEO model in the same way with a Presbyterian church because of One, they are required to have an elder board, whereas a lot of Reformed Baptists will too. Reformed Baptists will too. Baptists in general won't, but Reformed Baptists will. But because the pastor is accountable to a presbytery, they can't just run roughshod over their church. The church itself has an authority to appeal to above the pastor, not above, but that the pastor is accountable to. So, but within the pastor CEO model, you can appeal to the elders of the church, but if the elders are on board or if they've been sidelined, you have nowhere to go with it. Like these people, they have nowhere to go with it. Yeah. But if those people were a part of a Presbyterian denomination, they would go to the presbytery, and the presbytery would come in and clean house. Hopefully, God willing, unless the presbytery is also poisoned, which, PCUSA, there's plenty of Presbyterian denominations that are. But for a good presbytery, you have recourse as just...
You at least know what your avenues are.
Yes, correct. Yeah. At least you have an avenue. Yeah.
12 traits, and then we want to start new groups that aim for these 12 traits.
A church within a church. I'm not a pastor. I don't feel like it's my place to be baptizing people, being over like 100 people. Can you imagine the time commitment it is to be in charge of that many people? No. Why? The reason why we do church discipleship groups was for the intimacy. We could meet inside people's homes and we could love on one another in very specific ways. If somebody needed help moving from one apartment to another, we could do that. If someone had a really vulnerable prayer request, that they could feel comfortable sharing it, and we would keep it just confidential between us 8 women. It was a wonderful, special thing.
So that was something that is kind of interesting, because I do think that this is where, Joel Webben has obviously gotten blasted for saying the women's groups are just not a great thing.
Yeah.
But even that thought that there would be a prayer request that is best kept in a small group of women, because it's too, and I understand that obviously not everything is, let's, go all the way up the chain with this.
Right.
But at the same time, there is, even the way that she's describing this small group is a slight subversion of what church should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the issues really gets into the distinction between the priesthood of all believers, which is it's a Reformation doctrine, right? But you have to hold that doctrine in one hand and also be able to hold in your hand the biblical offices and their value and their importance, biblically speaking. So Baptist, oftentimes Congregational Baptist churches, they elevate the priesthood of all believers doctrine at the expense oh, that's in my face. At the expense of the actual elder qualified office, the elder, not so much deacon, but the elder qualified office, and then depending on how many offices you guys hold in your church, it undercuts those things. So she's talking about being asked to baptize. That's what we did. My wife baptized somebody in LA, and I look back and I'm like, oh yeah. And the reason was because I understood the Great Commission to be a command given to every Christian. Whereas now, as a Presbyterian, I understand that to be a commission given to the church, not given to every Christian. Right. Given to every Christian by way of the church. Yes, we're all called to go make disciples, but we're not all called to individually baptize them. The church was given the commission to go make disciples and baptize. Now, each individual Christian does that, but we're not supposed to be the ones. Every Christian doesn't go baptize. It's elder qualified in church in general. That's the general practice would be.
Well, and that, blurring that distinction
church
is why
offices.
Saddleback has women elders now.
Correct. When you start to blur that distinction, it's that slippery slope that just slides right on.
That was one of Rick, I don't know if you heard, that was one of Rick Warren's 3 texts that convinced him that women should be elders was the Great Commission.
Yep. Right. And a real simple rebuttal would be that was given to the church, and the church has leaders, and the leaders are men. Yeah. Yep. Cool.
And yes, we were 100% biblical. I don't understand this idea of being shallow at all. In fact, because of the design of these discipleship groups, we could go deeper.
CRT, cultural Marxism, none of that. So either he doesn't know.
Well, in the same breath saying, yes, 10 people. There's 10 different definitions. And the guy was literally asking him for his definition.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I don't care what the other 9 people are. What's yours?
You're saying you're not using it. What are you not using? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So either he was lying, or he was honestly too ignorant to be teaching.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's perhaps too ignorant to be teaching. I would say if you've bought into it, because I did. I wasn't all the way in, but I was using I said on the last one of our church's values was diversity.
Yeah.
And we believed that. We were like, we should have, should totally reflect the neighborhood. And I think that's actually a fine goal. I think if it's a down here goal and it's not a bind the conscience goal.
Right.
If you're like, no, I think it would be good. It would speak to us having a positive, thorough outreach program to have, as long as, I don't know, even just valuing melanin amounts
Right.
over any number of, any number of different qualities a person could have is where you're just flirting with, and you're either flirting with or you've bought into intersectionality.
Yeah.
At that point.
It's spiritual reparations.
Yeah.
We should reach these particular people. They need the extra boost because they've been oppressed for so long. So they need the special attention. But yeah,
Yeah, so basically cultural Marxism is crap. And that's what we have to say about it. Episode over. Just kidding. Let's keep
was
going.
living overseas at the time that he became the pastor. When I came back, it was a different church. All the ministries were pretty much shut down.
At the beginning, it was all cloaked like, oh, well, we just want to be more efficient and God honoring with our money and have more money spent on serving the persecuted church or sending missionaries out and things like that.
Even when we give to the spread of the gospel outside of the United States, almost 99% of that goes to places where the gospel's already gone. Less than 1% of our giving is going to places where the gospel hasn't gone. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. We've got to change where our heart is by putting treasure in the spread of the gospel where it hasn't gone.
We could have put a lot of money into international missions, but we didn't. It just didn't go there under David.
They basically decimated the infrastructure of the church and started saying things like, well, I'm sorry, but we can't do such and such, or we can't have such and such ministry because we don't have the staff for it, or we don't have the funding for it.
Dale Sutherland dismissed the team, both the volunteer coordinators in the ministry and the couple that taught preparing for marriage.
Do you remember there was a clip that went around? I don't remember. I think it was David Platt and Driscoll. I don't remember if it was David Platt. I know it was Driscoll, and it was Driscoll and somebody, and they were talking about how I think it was Platt. They cut the snack budget for the kids to give to global missions, and he was and Driscoll was like, "Hell no, you're not taking my kids Cheetos." Like, no, you're not doing that.
that's amazing.
Yeah, like you can take a pay cut, man. Like you're not. It was.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, Driscoll, you got your problems, but nice. he was take those Cheetos, man. He was actually kind of fired up.
I mean, how could you not? I mean, what a ridiculous pitch.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're looking at into, plus, I mean,
That's how deep in the budget you're going.
oh, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
how much are you making, man?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that he had to hit before that to be like, no, we need that though. We need that. Oh, we're doing Cheetos? We're not even doing like Great Value brand. Like, what are we
That's
doing?
right. Oh man, yeah. So Driscoll, that guy's a wild card. You never know what you're gonna get. Some unbiblical nonsense or just some wise words. You never know. It's like it's Russian roulette with him.
Experienced manager in the private sector. I managed projects, and it was easy to see there was organizational chaos.
The church got rid of a ministry called Downtime. It was a ministry where people could call in on weekends and evenings. And,
All night.
Yeah, and ask questions if they're going through a crisis. And that's a ministry that I took over at McLean, and there was a web page on the McLean website, and I put up like 3 or 4
I thought, because we're backstage, I could say this. But when he said the ministry was called Downtime, I really thought it was going to be a special needs ministry.
That would have been better.
That's a great name.
Oh my gosh. I really hope that they had like those interstate billboards where it's like the feet of a baby or whatever, or just the Jesus Saves with just a phone number.
Yeah.
Sermons from Lon Solomon and David Platt, and
Great mustache.
I'd handpicked sermons that people could listen to when they're going through a crisis, and the church just took it down.
And they didn't tell him?
No phone call, so the calls just stopped coming in.
David Platt did a good job of erasing any evidence that Lon was even a senior pastor for 37 years. Every sermon of him was wiped off the website with no warning to us as the congregation.
This is not Lon Solomon's church anymore. This is David Platt's church.
David Platt's proxies are running the church.
I went from a place of lots of support, lots of care, this tapering process to all of a sudden, they got rid of the shepherding coaches, they got rid of the coaching, they got rid of the library that the small group leaders could use to get materials and resources for their small group. They got rid of the ministries, they got rid of the funding, they got rid of the people.
And they were just kind of pushed out and told they weren't needed anymore. And the fact is they were needed. There wasn't not a need, for example, for the clothing ministry during COVID. They were told that was non-essential, and that was shut down. Bible studies weren't meeting there anymore. I don't think they were allowed to meet there anymore.
You're crushed. And we loved that church. We absolutely loved it. We have 3 boys. 2 of our boys are artistic, and the special needs ministry there was such a huge impact for us. It was such
we just crushed the ones who went to the church and had adult children there, and probably little kids too. All those families don't have anywhere to go now.
Those ministries were closed down because David Young wanted a new paradigm, which I truly, in a way, I sat there and listened and didn't quite understand. And I would ask in elder meetings, I said, well, we've cut all this stuff. What are we doing? How are we ministering to people? And I couldn't get an answer out of anybody. I really couldn't. Us elders, we told David Platt he had to fire David Young and get rid of him. And all the elders were in agreement. David, terminate him. Okay, I will. Well, come to find out a year later, David Young was never fired.
What?
He was still on the books, getting a ton of money. Obviously, Dave Platt.
If that's true, that is damning.
That's pretty crazy.
Every documentary has its bias, it's weaving a narrative, but some of these if these are facts on the ground, it's like, if your elder board truly, because he could be saying that and it was actually split. Like there were elders that, maybe in a shady way were brought on, that were on his team, that it wasn't quite as cut and dry. That could be the case. So we want to be charitable to some degree, but man, if that's true, how is he? Do you follow? I'm sure you do. The Smash Bales account.
Yes.
That guy goes hard. My gosh.
He's not scared.
He's not scared. He's like, David Platt should be in prison. It's like, oh, tell me how you really feel. But and I see this, I'm like, maybe not prison, I don't know, but this is really ugly, man. Golly. Anyway.
I do love where you paused it there, though.
I know.
We do have the overlay there, especially because David Platt got those crazy eyes right behind him.
Dude, he does. He gets those crazy eyes, doesn't he? He gets those crazy eyes.
Kept that from us. David and David were...
Yeah.
What's funny is that's he's smiling right there.
That's his happy face. That's right.
Very clear.
For centuries, it has been clear to those with eyes to see that true harmony in the land begins with right worship. The reformers of old, the Puritans, and the architects of the American founding understood that when worship is corrupted, the culture crumbles. In an age awash with compromise and confusion, the call for bold and faithful pastors has never been more urgent. The modern pulpit must not be a platform for retreat, but a fortress of courage. To answer this need, New St. Andrew's College, in partnership with Greyfriars Hall, has launched a new Masters of Divinity program designed to equip pastors to stand firm in the storm, proclaim truth without flinching, and lead their flocks with conviction and clarity. They are searching for 8 to 12 students per year, mature men who manage their households well, aspire to the office of elder, embody the ministry qualifications set forth in Scripture, and fit the theology and ethos of Christ Church in New St. Andrew's College. This is not a program for the faint-hearted, but for those ready to reclaim the pulpit as the spearhead of cultural renewal. Learn more at greyfriarshall.com and join the ranks of church leaders who will shape the future.
Close. David Platt was never going to fire David Young. He wanted to hire a director of diversity.
everything started to change with the worship ministry, where they started discussing how can we attract more diverse people to be on the worship team, and basically the white people weren't allowed to be on stage. I think it was one.
Good grief.
So I think that's interesting though, and I don't know if you've read. So it's a good book in the sense that it follows up Spurgeon's downgrade controversy. MacArthur's Ashamed of the Gospel, which is a critique of the seeker-friendly movement. It is interesting to see that infiltrate in that way.
Yeah.
Where it still is under the guise of, we need to get, like, these people have not had the gospel in this way. It's still the same thing. It's still just, how can we pragmatically change church to attract more people, and more pagans at that. Like, I mean, obviously, like that is the draw.
That's the draw.
Because otherwise, if these are faithful believers that are just happy doing their thing in their black churches, why are we worried about them coming to McLean?
Right.
So it is interesting that, tracing back to MacArthur 40 years ago, Spurgeon forever ago,
right?
You have the same issue. It's all just, how can we change church to get more people in the doors? Which, I mean, it's not different than what Stephen Furtick does.
No.
It's just it's a different targeted demographic.
That movement, I think, as we get further from it, will go down in the history books as such just a devastating misstep for the church. It fundamentally changed the nature of what the Sunday Lord's Day worship is supposed to be and has always been.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't have that even fully worked out until coming to the CREC and kind of getting taught, hey, what is this for? What are Sundays? What's happening there?
Right.
Yeah. Because we've lost that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes a show, to use these carnal means, like earlier in the documentary, he's using ping pong balls and Legos and, all that kind of stuff. It's like, there's no fear of God. No fear of God.
No. And no reverence. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for Pastor Brooks in is that he very much understands that he's standing in the place of Christ there in the pulpit. Like, that is his job, to stand there as a figure ordained for, to speak in place of the Lord. And he's not going to bring Legos to do that.
Dude, no, you don't bring Legos on Sunday morning.
There's no reverence for the office at all.
No.
And I think that does trickle down even to congregants, where you have people like, I mean, I firmly believe that if Pastor Brooks were to see something in my life and say, hey, I've seen this, I think this needs to change. I'm obligated to change that.
Yes.
Unless I have biblical warrant as to why I would say you're wrong. But even then, if I'm going to continue going to Pilgrim Hill and saying he is my elder,
right?
The elders of St. Mark right now are my elders, I need to submit there.
Yeah, that's interesting. This gets into our sphere sovereignty discussion, which is that there's something like a flexion point has just happened if he were to confront you on something. Either he's right biblically and you do need to change this thing, or he's wrong and he is improperly exercising his pastoral authority, in which case he needs to change and even repent of that.
Yeah.
That becomes an interesting...
And depending, I guess, in the way that the confrontation is made. Because if it's tertiary issues and it's something where it's like, hey, this is not something that...
What I'm saying is, if he binds the conscience, if this is like a elder shepherding command that says, like, if you do not change this, you're in sin and you're headed for church discipline.
Right.
At that point, either he's right or he's wrong, in which case he needs to repent for overstepping his pastoral bounds and binding the conscience inappropriately.
Right. Well, and ironically, this is, for COVID, the church we were at when we left, in the conversations that I was having with the elders trying to get clarity on where, okay, so it culminated in like basically a either mask or don't come type of situation.
Yeah.
Throughout those conversations, I said repeatedly, if you believe I'm in sin, I just asked them point blank, do you believe I'm in sin?
Right.
And it would be no, which the follow would be like, do you believe that there's gray areas, whether or not it's sin or glorifying God? Because as far as I'm concerned, there are quote unquote gray issues, believer to believer. But even on those gray issues, somebody's actually right and somebody's actually wrong, and we'll find out come Judgment Day.
Right.
So there are no meaningless actions that we take. Either we are sinning or we are glorifying God.
Right.
And so I would ask them, like, do you believe that there's a third type of action that I can take that is just neutral?
What caused you to? You were at the Access, is that right?
No, we were at.
No, you were working at that.
My wife was the children's director.
Yes.
Yes.
What was the point at which you said, no more, we're going to Pilgrim Hill or going elsewhere?
So they had throughout COVID started doing like masks. I I work for a large corporate company, and so I had to get a vaccine exemption form. So I met with the pastor, talked with him, basically said I was an idiot. These vaccines were going to cure cancer, because he had a friend who studied biology.
Classic.
And so, but like he ended up signing it only if it said, Zach's pastor, believe Zach to believe these things. Not these are the right things. These are the right things. Yeah. But just Zach believes this. So he signed that, but obviously there's tension there.
Yeah.
And so then that kind of culminated throughout the entire time. I was pretty anti-mask again. Listened to a lot of James White.
That's right.
And so basically what ended up happening is I think it was Omicron or whatever, one of the super later variants where they were like, we're going to start masking again. And so in these meetings with the elders that I had, my wife and I had at that time, we asked all the elders to meet. And so they had implemented that like after we had scheduled the meeting, but before the meeting. So at the meeting, I said, and what is the response going to be if we show up not wearing masks? And I got it'd be unloving. I got all the typical stuff that you get. And so we didn't go. And that was kind of the straw. And over the next couple of weeks, I had asked the elders for biblical justification for canceling services for things like COVID, or, hey, Christmas is on a Sunday, so we're not going to have church, and stuff like that. And so I was like, what fundamentally is this? And so those kind of questions, which I guess actually the real breaking point was I was helping with the youth, and I had met with the youth pastor and asked like, hey, so they
youth. I like that. I mean, I'm with you.
And so
for those who are just listening, there's our air quotes around youth pastor.
Yeah, because it's not real.
Yeah, it's not a real office.
But yeah, so I met with him because we were buds. We met weekly, and I just said like, hey, is it going to be an issue if I come to youth not masked? And he was like, no, I think it'll be fine. Why show up not masked? Pastor's kids were part of that youth team. Everybody's masked but me at this thing. And all these kids looking at me weird, not weird, but I'm, noticing that I'm not wearing a mask. Yeah. I get a call at 10:30 that night from the pastor saying he was fuming mad that I would do that. And so there it was like, I'm lying in bed. It's 10:30 at night. And this pastor.
The pastor texted you.
Called me.
Oh. What on earth?
He called me because he was so upset that it couldn't wait. It needed to be this. And so I'm like playing like these two battles because obviously I have my wife next to me. You can hear as I'm talking on the phone and trying to be level-headed, trying to just say, look, I spoke with the youth pastor, said it'd be fine. He said, well, I was talking to him and he said he didn't. And I was like, no, that's not what happened. There was nothing. I was not trying to deceive anyone. I tried to go down the right avenues. But yeah, so I mean, that was kind of the real point where it became, this is not, somebody's in sin here.
Yes, correct.
And I do think that my biggest regret is I do, and I go back and forth on the accusations against an elder type of situation. I do wish that I was less ambiguous on if I'm not in sin, then you're barring me from fellowship. So what are we calling that?
Woo! Oh man,
I wish that I had a little more punch, but
so that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah,
I'm thankful it did. Sad, but you're
me
here
too.
now.
Me too. Yeah.
You're here in the dark roasted studio.
And like as far away from that, because it is such an evangelifish church.
Yeah.
Like so much so. And so I couldn't be happier that that's not where we're at now.
Oh man. Yeah. Coming to to Pilgrim Hill, just to a CREC church in general. And I've had so many people say this who have finally just like pulled the plug on, that's so bad. We don't believe in euthanasia, so let's we probably won't use that illustration. But on that dying church, whatever.
Maybe you need to go to downtime.
Yeah, honestly. But and finally go to a CREC church, and they say it's like coming home. Because once you start coming to these convictions, when you begin the journey and those start to mature and develop and ripen, you just start feeling like a black sheep.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guy, I think he just joined the Discord. Regardless, he reached out on, we talked on the phone. He's a pastor in Mississippi, and he's started to go down this Reformation rabbit hole, and he's just got nobody. He's a pastor, and he's like, he told me every time I see communion like passed and my kids aren't taking, he's like, I want to cry. Oh, how tough, man.
Yeah, there's a conversation to be had there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Brooks. So when we left that church and we were going to the Reformed Baptist Church, I had met with Brooks because we tried Pilgrim Hill before going to that Reformed Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like a happier middle ground,
Yeah.
But I met with Brooks and just said, hey, like I would love, one of the things that this has taught me is I need to have godly men. And so would you just be willing to like disciple me?
Yeah.
Whatever. And one of the things that he told me early on was it's hard to be a Canon Plus man in a Gospel Coalition world.
That is true, man.
And
True.
The more conversations that I had, even with the pastor and an elder at the church we were at in the interim, it was just kind of obvious. And I wasn't even pedo then.
Yeah.
Like we hadn't hit like the full stride.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah. Is Zack Catholic type stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean those kind of conversations just like were very obvious where it was just, there's a certain level of growth that could happen here. But I don't know.
Speak of the devil.
The man, the myth, the legend.
There he is. We're just finishing up our dark roasted episode. Yeah. Pastor Brooks says hi. He's never been on a dark roasted episode.
No?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, we did it.
Not controversial enough?
Or did you finish your thought? What were you saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, so that concept of not being able to be, that is being hard to be a Canon Plus man in a Gospel Coalition world. The conversations that I had in that world just became very obvious where there was a certain amount of growth that could happen there, but it wasn't going to be the full-fledged thing that I want for my family.
I can attest.
It wasn't going to be people hearing the claims that Scripture makes and truly wanting to apply that everywhere.
Right.
To not be afraid of, hey, my conscience might hit me in some places where maybe I just need to, correct in what I'm doing is fine. But being able to have that kind of prick.
Totally.
And I think that that's one thing, even with the CREC and with all of our groups, there's the fear of, hey, this is going to be kind of hard to dig through. And there might be a season where I need to abstain while I'm working through whether or not I think this is a good thing.
Yeah.
But we should wrestle with those things. And we should dig into that, and let's do that hard work of applying Scripture everywhere.
Yep. Oh, and that was the big draw for me. One of the biggest draws for me to this world was that exact point, like the focus on the sufficiency of Scripture for all of, not just faith, but all of life.
Right.
Oh, what a breath of fresh air to hear the guys in this world really just taking even just obscure Old Testament passages and teasing those out.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, even like the first time I heard somebody wrestle through the don't boil a kid in his mother's milk.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's such a verse that everybody I've ever talked to, like nobody would even, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah. Okay.
They couldn't do that. Why?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like actually think through the principle being taught there. Actually dig into that. Like, let's look at God's law and actually do the hard work of being like, what is this teaching us for now? Because it is for us.
Yeah,
now.
but we have the New Testament. Why would we?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that does it for us. This was fun. We got about 10 minutes through our documentary, but you guys let us know if you guys want more of the documentary, if you guys want to jump back into some other conversations and stuff. But Zach's going to come on in some future episodes. Unless you guys just boo him out of here, so that
could happen.
That would hurt.
That could happen.
But you won't know about it though.
No, I'll be checking the Discord and be like, how was this received?
Yeah. That's right. All right, so we'll leave you guys with that. you guys know the charge. Our hope and prayer for you is that even in this conversation and us kind of talking through this documentary, that all of this would be a tool to better equip you to build, defend, and expand the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.